All right, greetings. So turn up the video speed. When I see these situations on TV and they say these people look like they're insane, they're clown shows, and it's nothing against trans people, but it also is an armor of sorts if you happen to be doing this. Yeah. How to fake crazy to get a free check for the rest of your life from the government. Yeah. This is Freedom Phil. Like and subscribe. Let's get into it. And hey, turn up the video speed. Kind of a weird topic, right? And this is going to be kind of a deep dive. I'm going to tell you what I've observed. Because me, I went out and did trucking and van life, trucking and traveling, moved garbage and did, lived minimalistically. So I've had the game. I'm like, I own this house. I'm doing just fine in life. You know, I'm living ridiculously dirt cheap, a lot like some of my friends did. And I got probably, if I think off the top of my head, 5 friends that got on that SSI as young as possible. One of them, maybe I'll tell the story of the crown jewel of the situation, the guy that retired at 18 and how he did it. Yeah. So we got to go a little back history to understand how it got to the point where you could just be like, I had the Hattahas to get a free check. How did we get to this point? All right. So an age and a half ago, we used to put people in rubber rooms and asylums for acting nutty. So people didn't act nutty. People that were nutty kept it together because they didn't want to be in an asylum. That sucks. That's like, you don't want to be there. And so people would keep themselves in order. And sometimes you would see this, sometimes the nuttiness, if they were drinking or drugs, would come out when they're at home. So maybe some domestic violence, but things go untreated because, people didn't want to be in an asylum. Well, after a certain amount of time, there's people that were talking about the fact that some of the people that were in the asylums, they weren't like nutty. They weren't bad nutty. And so at some point, it became a constitutional issue plus a cost issue. I think it was either back in Jimmy Carter or early Reagan when this happened, and they just opened up the doors to the asylums and said, hey, you're all out. And you're all out, but going to what? I mean, it's kind of like when someone gets out of prison. So you're out, you're free, but you can't find a job and you have nowhere to live. Now, maybe some of them had friends or family and they were better off. They were better set off. But sometimes some of these people, because of just how they've acted over the years, their family doesn't want them back. And so they're on the streets. Well, it isn't long until, like maybe they figure out, okay, here's the soup kitchen. Here's where I can set up a tent. And you're getting hassled occasionally, maybe by the cops. It isn't long until some of these people commit some sort of oops crime. Or let's just say they got put in jail for possessing some weed back in the day. And then so they go to jail. Now, this makes the situation even worse. So you have someone who's not a violent offender necessarily. Maybe they're just, public disturbance. Or maybe they did steal some stuff. And you put them in jail. Well, here's what happens. You got somebody, and I don't know what the numbers were back then, but it used to cost about, this a few years ago, $40K to $50K per year to incarcerate somebody. And you're putting these mildly insane people with people that are actually violent criminals. So it only makes the situation worse for a lot of people. You have to learn to survive in that. So we're not talking about so much the humanity in this next part of the situation of these people, because a lot of people couldn't give a damn less. A lot of times these people are men because a lot of insane women, well, they just crank out a kid and get on welfare. So they get taken care of. So the insane women do just fine. They're like, oh yeah, they just shack up with a guy. Maybe they're with him. Maybe they get on welfare. Maybe they got something. But the insane men, well, it's your lot in life, and sorry, buddy, it sucks to be you. So here's where it seems kind of like you're not doing this for these guys' best interest. You're doing it partially for saving money long term and maybe a little bit of empathy. Where you take these people and instead of, eventually when they're in jail, before they go into jail, you get some of them and you get them into like a little sliver of an apartment and all the utilities paid. Or maybe they live with a family member and you give them a check because these people are nutty. And maybe there was some good intentions here and there, but a lot of it had to do with one person in jail, let's say, is $50,000 a year. Well, if you give them $10,000 a year and they live with a family member or they have a sliver of an apartment or a trailer or something, you're saving $40K per year for the system. So it's just good numbers. Plus, it is more empathetic. And this is where the grifters come in. Like I said, how to fake crazy to get a check. And like I said, I think I had 5 buddies. that I can think off the top of my head that faked crazy or some form of SSI. Like, I'm disabled. Like, and you'll see him out there doing some normal stuff. Like, yeah, you're disabled, dude. Like, and let me go over some of the morality mechanics of where I grew up. I grew up in a broke ass logging town, fairly decent in size. The mills would shut down semi regularly, layoffs and whatnot. I mean, you as a regular guy going out and applying for a job, and if this is the only thing and I grew up in that kind of broken environment where you're out applying for jobs, you're thankful you just have a job, and then you're in a situation where there are so many other regular, just decent, good guys just like you that you are disposable. You are ridiculously disposable. And so you see it on both ends, like in the economy. You see this kind of sadistic nature to some degree that some employers have, like their business is some sort of fiefdom and something, and you're a serf. And then you see the other side of it, like when people all start saying, hey, we're not working those jobs, we're not dealing with this crap, screw it. Then you see the employees get really persnickety. Like there's a nice balanced place where everybody's happy and healthy when both parties kind of need each other. But when it gets to either extreme, not so good. So I remember one time one of my buddies, this is before he faked crazy, back when he was married and trying to make it work. He couldn't find a job of any sort of real job because all those were like, hey, good old boy network type of thing where like, yeah, nepotism and all that. You're not getting that mill job, working even cleaning up sawdust or anything like that. And also a lot of times in those mills, they would want to make sure you had kids and debt, and that way you would be a good employee. Basically, you're not gonna cause any trouble. You're show up. You could be abused and all that crap. Well, one of my buddies was working at Wendy's because he couldn't get one of those wonderful mill jobs, and I remember him telling me, after I pay my rent, I can't really afford even decent food for my family. Like we're going to the food bank and I work a job. And he's like, I make people's food all day and I can't afford, much better than beans and rice. And I'm like, wow, that's really screwed up when you think about it. And so that kind of thing down the road, I remember this guy, he retired at 30 because one guy, crown jewel of him, retired at 18. One guy that I can think off the top of his case was 25, and a couple other guys. Yeah, they just kind of I know they're on the system. It's just a matter of when. I don't know when exactly they got on it. So you have that situation where how do you get onto the system? Because now that it seems like we're giving checks to people, women if you don't have kids, but most women just end up cranking out a kid to get even more benefits. With the men, it's like you got to kind of. Sometimes you can just go down to the state office, the welfare office, and a lot of times though you start applying for other things because you're already broke. So EBT or AKA food stamps, and then once you got that, once you got the first step, your job kind of becomes how do I get more? And then while you're there, maybe you act a little kind of nutty or whatnot, or there might even be a situation where you can just be evaluated, and they're like, well, clearly you're not competent. And let me tell you the real kind of sad truth about this. Like I said, maybe there were some good intentions initially, but after a while, when your job becomes justifying why you're employed for the government, people stop caring. They just like, hey, I don't care if this person gets a check as long as I'm helping process these people. We continue to have my job, my government job. And so it comes from that own protection. So you want to increase the number of nutty ass people, allegedly nutty, so you can keep on getting your paycheck. Let's be honest about that. Bureaucracy wants to keep itself growing. But yeah, you go there, you tell them a bunch of like Alex Jones or some crazy conspiracy crap. What's funny about that sometimes is like years later when whatever some of the stuff they've said, and they're like, they point it out and people are like, that's just insane. And then 2 or 3 years later, it comes out the government admits it was true. And it's like, oh, isn't that funny? But yeah, once you get on that system, how do you work it? Some people just, veg out. They got their little sliver of apartment. Or the other thing you'll see is they'll live with a family member. Like you give a travel trailer or something. And so they'll say, oh, I pay like $300 a month for rent. And so they give you the $300 for rent. And then on top of that, enough money. So we're talking like $1,000 per month. which does that sound like a lot of money? Well, if you have no bills, no problems, no utilities, no issues, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money to play with. I mean, you could be fucked up all the time with that type of money. So you end up having a situation where a lot of them, if they get the travel trailer and they, one guy I knew, he lived next to his dad's diesel shop. And they showed up, the city showed up and like, you can't live next to this place. It's not zoned for that. I'm the night watchman. They're like, good answer. So he just basically lived next to his dad's diesel shop, and which is good for both of them because his dad was getting kind of elderly. And so somebody to keep an eye on him and whatnot. And yeah, he got free rent. Now, you can only have so much money on the system. So how do you get around this? Well, you buy things. You buy things that have value. And then some things you got to stash. Most of it you got to stash. And what type of things, like at least in the country, in the county, that I could say. Like, for instance, guns. Guns are always good because there's always a market for guns, especially if you also know how to do a little repair work on them. So, yeah, there's one way right there. The other one is like tools, chainsaws, some sort of tools, tools that can be. Chainsaws always have a good value because there's always somebody eventually looking for a saw. Plus, you can use that saw to go get firewood and sell it under the table, And the way you do that is you don't sit around, park a truck or anything to sell wood. You have a list of people that you're selling wood to, and you can also do under the table construction work. That's another way to bring in money. So the last one, a lot of people would be kind of surprised at. But it's you take your extra money, once you've got enough welfare guns and chainsaws, you go out and buy some gold and silver. Easy to it's small, easy to stash, has value, you can trade it in. No records at all. So you're ironically, even if you're not lifting one finger doing much of anything else, because how much does it really cost to eat? You're getting like $200 to $300 in food stamps for a single person. Well, I can tell you I could easily feed myself for anywhere from $50 to $100, depending on how I do it, per month. So you got an extra $200 something for food. And by the way, this is also the reason you see a lot of people that are on the system are ridiculously fat, because here's something, pro tip. Hit up your food banks and then augment what you got from the food banks, augment that with your food stamps. And this is why you see so many fat people on the system, because they get more than enough food from the food banks. But then it turns out when they go out there and they have if they're a single person, $200, $300. I mean, I got $200 way back in the day. I was unemployed at the time. Unemployment had run out. And I was like, why not? Why not give it a try? Before I ended up becoming an over-the-road trucker. And double stuffed Oreos, Doritos, soda pop. Yeah, you can buy all this crap. This is not food. This is garbage. You can go down the Dollar Tree candy aisle or chip aisle and just grab whatever you want, because that's all technically food. And so that's what a lot of these people do. And you say, so why are they so fat? That's why. Because they already got everything they need. So at that point, after they've got the basics they're going to need for the month. And by the way, funny thing about it is when you or me would go and look at the grocery store, well, I can't afford that meat, or I can't afford eggs. Like right now, a dozen eggs is $5. I mean, I like eggs, but not that much. They can get that. They can get that luxury stuff. They can get that luxury fish. You know why? Because they only needed maybe $50 to $100 if they're in the food bank to get everything they need for food. So the rest of the 200 to 250, maybe even more, they just piss away on bullshit, which is hilarious to me, because it's like you've set up a system where you're rewarding people. Now, I know a lot of people would look at this and go, well, what about the morality of it? Well, let's be honest. If most people could get a check tomorrow, like they could retire, Social Security, if they could get Social Security, and nobody would question that. You're like, well, you're 60 years old, and it's okay that you're now a welfare recipient. Well, what if you just don't care what people think? Like you don't care whatsoever. You're like, what? These same people that did nothing when I was struggling, why should I care what they think if I'm getting a free check? So they didn't care then. Well, I don't care if they have a negative opinion about me now because they weren't doing anything good for me. And that is a very logical way to look at things, especially in a broken community. Like when you try to do the right thing and you are effectively punished for doing it, are you surprised that people do the wrong thing? And this even comes into where people do illegal stuff doing the same system. where they're selling drugs. You know, I mean, a lot of people, I got to be honest, a lot of people, once they get that check and they're doing just fine, most of them just veg out. But let me tell you some other ways this can go as well. You can make up to like 2,000 something, have $2,000 of assets per month. You can make a certain amount. So let's just say you make your money. You actually work a side job. And by the way, if you think this sounds like something nobody would do, a lot of Walmart employees have done it, where they're working this job, but they're working at a pay rate that would be, you couldn't support your actual lifestyle or income or anything. Without the assistance, it wouldn't happen. And so between the food stamps, the government assistance, and then the check, they're actually, because they've got all their basics taken care of, they're actually living better than most people. So imagine you make another $700 or $1,000 per month on top of all your benefits and everything else. You've just got that much more money to piss away on whatever you want. But don't save it, because if you save too much and they see that in the bank, oh, well, they're going to kick you off the system. So most people just piss it away on dumb stuff. Whatever they make, whatever they get, just gets recirculated into the system immediately. Other people, like I said, gold, silver, chainsaws, guns. And it's funny because stuff like, like let's say you want to go out camping in the middle of the week when there's nobody out there. So you go out camping, you do a little fishing. And while you're out there, you bring back a load of firewood. You've got a long list of people, old people generally, or people who have firewood, and they pay you for however much the going rate is for a cord of wood, whether it's still green out of the field or if it's been cured. And that's good money. That's like, if I don't know what it goes for these days, probably $200-300 a cord during the winter. It used to be like 150 out of the field and then 200 for cured. Because here's the thing: when you take it out of the truck, you got to take it and toss it out of the truck into a pile, let it cure in the wind, or put it in a woodshed. It's got to have some air going through it, and then you have to take the time to put it all back in the truck down the road and bring it to someone's house and unload it then. That's why it costs more, because it's more time and effort. But you just went out camping, went fishing, maybe did a little berry picking, kind of looked some deer trails, did a little shooting, and then came back with a load of wood, and you just made how much on that? Yeah, it's a beautiful scam. I mean, look, I'm not saying I approve of it, but it is absolutely, like, it's a reflection of the world we live in the West. Like, oh, we're poor, we're this. Yeah, poverty isn't what you think it is. There are, yes, legitimate homeless people out there that are absolutely nuts, usually drug addicts, that are living in a bad way. But there's a ton of people out there that are like, hey, man, fake it till I made it, and they make it, doing just fine. Now I want to tell you about, like, the one guy that was 30 that did it. He faked crazy, because he saw the other guy, that at 25, bucket drum guy. That guy was actually, when we say homeless, living in a tent, I think there's just a different mentality, like homeless like you see in the cities, and then there's like some drifter that doesn't want to pay rent. Like, I'm a van lifer when I'm driving truck. I don't consider myself homeless. I got my van. Like, people are like, don't you want to live in your house? Not really. There's just too much to explore and do. But I think homeless to some degree is a mentality, how you handle yourself. And so some of these people are just like, well, I think life's a scam anyways. And let's be honest, it kind of is. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed how much money we're given to other countries recently. For what? So they could tell us nice things and then just, talk shit behind our back. Yeah. How much did we spend on military contracts? So you're telling a bunch of people that you expect to pay the taxes, especially when you've raised them in a broken situation. No jobs, too many good men, basically treated like crap. Hey, go out and work and do the right thing. Well, the right thing doesn't get the right results. So not surprisingly, some of them just kind of, they go native. They go off grid to some degree. They just go do their own thing. And when you're getting, for instance, $1,000 a month, and you have basically no bills, whether it's living in a sliver apartment or living in a tent or living in a trailer next to your family's house or whatever, maybe on some land, maybe you pay $100 or $200 for some land, per month. And you've got your own little paradise in the middle of nowhere for almost nothing. You're telling a bunch of people I should choose to suffer throughout the course of my life versus taking what would be logically the easiest, the path of least resistance. And I know people like to think there's some greater nobility or something like that in the human spirit, but generally there's not. Most people are just animals in the sense that they're at their best when they're trying to get laid, and the rest of the time they're trying to conserve calories so they don't have to work and fight as much. You want an example of this? Look at lions. Lions are a great example of that. After they get the big kill, I mean, what do they sleep for 23 hours? Why? Because more hunting equals more potential injuries. So I'm not surprised that people are doing this. Now, bringing back the trans part for a second, one of the genius things about that strategy, and I have nothing against trans people whatsoever, but look, there's a lot of fakers out there. There's these people that act a little eccentric and crazy, and then they're like, I'm afraid that people are going to hunt me down, and I have anxiety, and you're not allowed to question it. You're not allowed to question it because they're a protected group. All right? So, big surprise, you see some of these people, not all, there's lots of regular folks that are trans, that yeah, they mix it in. I'm a this status. I like look one. I remember the one guy was like. Then this is another place, not where I grew up, but I'm was it? I'm a trans female, trans lesbian. So translation: you're into chicks. You're just a dude that wears a dress occasionally, and you're getting a check from the government. And I'm like, oh god, I'm like, it's such a good scam. Now, who was the crown jewel? I won't name his name, but I'll tell you how he did it. We were hanging out, partying with this dude, and he shows up. He's a friend, mutual friend, and his eyes were blotted out, And you're like, what do you mean blotted out? He'd done some acid, and he was really, really high. And he kind of was high for a while, and then he's out walking around, and apparently someone noticed this and then called the cops. And so they take him in, to evaluate him medically, make sure he's okay. And then they get him to a psychiatrist because this lasted for a while. And he might have actually planned this all out. But he was 18 years old. And they go up and they say, well, you can't be God, because he thought he was God. And he looks at him with these big moony eyes. Can you prove I'm not? And they're like, well, you're clearly nuts. And he got a little sliver of an apartment. All the utilities paid. Brand new apartment, by the way. They just renovated this huge building in the downtown. And these were nice places. And the sad part is when we first started, going up there to hang out, because, like, hey man, you want to hang out? He's like, oh yeah, come on up. And you could smell the new carpet. It was a nice place. And then over the course of time, because here's what happens. You have some of the people that know the passcode to the place. They come up to visit their friend without really knocking, like doing the knock at the door outside the building. And some of them are drunk and they piss in the fucking hallways. So it didn't even take 5 years before this place that was brand new started having a little bit of issues here and there. And it's just like, wow, so I can't have a dog in an apartment, but you can have a semi-homeless friend of yours pissing in the hallway. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, fake crazy, got a check. Retired at 18. And I want to put this in perspective. How good could your life be if you were retired younger? Yeah, the same thing that I can do, except for I just did it legitimately. Basically, you can go out and you wake up in the morning, let's go take a bike ride somewhere. You get a little exercise. Maybe walk the dog. And well, actually, a lot of cases, unless you're living on your own, you can't really have a dog. If you're living in if you're living in a government assistance, pets aren't really a thing. Because, pets in a building. But, yeah, you get up, do that, go take a bike ride, maybe smoke a bowl at some point, work in your garden. Oh, go hit up the gym. By the way, you get a free gym pass because, oh, yeah, we're trying to, get people healthy. What about going to higher education? Yeah, you could get your free college. It might be community college, but you can get it paid for. Because the government wants to get people on the rolls, but what they also want is success stories. So they can show this person, oh yeah, he's got some issues, but he's a really good computer programmer. I mean, the guy that retired at 18 by faking crazy with the acid, that guy could literally go to the Goodwill back in the day and get 3 or 4 computers, old computers, and put them together and get a perfectly functioning rig going. It wouldn't be the top of the line, but it would do everything basic people needed. You want to watch YouTube, you want to do, typing emails, all the basic things that most regular folks would do. It could do it. He was that good. And he was just absolutely wasted talent. That guy should have been working at some computer company doing something, some sort of, he was a programmer too, you know, but he found a way out and he was getting by just fine. And yeah, it's funny. In fact, he lived at the old trailer for a while. It was a single wide trailer where there was a hole. He's the one that named the cat. They used to hop in through the hole that was in the bathroom from underneath the house. And he called it Fuckface the cat. He's like, fuck, get off my face, because the cat would come into the house. And we'd all be sitting there. It'd be in the morning, wake up, and they can come through the hole. Meow, meow. And we're like, hey, fuckface. You know, but yeah, it wasn't too long after that he met Fake Crazy, and yeah, he had that check. And I know a lot of people would look at it and go, that's so horrible. You know, but you got to think, did we really train anybody right? Was, like, we were in a place where, thanks to the way log trading was going as far as lumber and whatnot, a lot of the jobs, there were just too many good people and not enough good jobs. So if you're crapping on someone for taking the easy way out because you worked hard, well, maybe reconsider, maybe train people better. It's like what I've said. Most people don't think in the actual forward way of doing things. Everybody does things in reverse. And I know I've said it before and I'll say it again. But like, if you go out and say, for instance, drive truck, do the van life, live as cheap as possible, minimalism, or trades or whatnot, and live with your parents, live as cheap as possible. Yes, don't buy the cars, don't buy the crap, don't buy all this garbage that's going to be on credit. Don't get a luxury degree, get a real degree if you're going to go to college. And by the way, we should make college online as much as possible, make it as cheap as possible. This is not a message that anybody heard when I was a kid. No, nobody I knew had any clue about compound interest whatsoever. They did not. They were not trained to think this way. So, you had a school system that failed these people because all they did was pass people through year after year. That's all they did. And then you had a job economy that fails people. And you can see this also. No, I'm not trying to, pointy fingers or, be negative, but you see this in the ghetto, just like you see it in Appalachia. Once people have found a way out, a way to get by just fine without having to do all the nonsense, they're like, well, I'm getting by. No reason I should work harder than I have to. So I don't know. If you don't want to see more of this, well, then you need to start kicking some of these people off. But two, don't just kick them off and have them, probably being a problem down the road. Actually produce jobs. First, have the jobs available that'll pay enough to pay a family goddamn wage. And if you're not willing to do that, if you're not willing to admit that we're going to make the situation better for the common man, well, then the common man's going to continue to do the easiest way out. And the funniest thing about this? A lot of these people end up having kids. Because, when it comes to the women, no offense, a lot of you are nutty as fuck. But what ends up happening is that they just have a kid and get on Section 8 welfare and get all the same benefits and more. Because, the children. So I don't know. You kind of get what you incentivize. If you tax something, you get less of it. And if you fund it, you get more of it. And sad part is the best of intentions, along with some of it just being purely economical, like, trying to help a few poor people. But that's where I see some of these fakers out there. And I'm not going to be like, that's a horrible person, but I could see the scam with a lot of them. Just like when I've bum change, hit up all the different places. I can read them. So I don't know. That's kind of, I told you it was going to be a deep dive. And that's why I always say turn up the video speed, because I listen to myself at 2 times the speed. When I listen to books, I listen at 3 times the speed. You know why? Because 1 hour, 24-hour book, how quickly can you do that in 3 hours? Like 3 hours, 1 hour, 3 hours. But anyways, Freedom Phil, like and subscribe. Always turn up the video speed. Y'all have a great day.